.com. I want to respond to Ricky, who sent a text just a little bit ago when we were talking about my time in prison, spending time in prison. Ricky, I want to tell you, there is in no way did I feel sorry for either of those women on death row. My point about that was I had to remind myself of the horrendous things that they did. Because when you're talking with them, they've gotten into a routine of a life that seems so normal to them that you forget what they did. So I certainly don't want to glorify that. My mind was always on the family of the young 13-year-old girl who was killed in a horrendous way. No child should ever go through that, and no parent should ever have to feel that pain and suffering of not only losing a child, but how they lost that child. So I want to be clear about that. I don't feel sorry for anyone that's in there. They're there for a reason. Are you familiar with the American Conservative Union Foundation? It's one of the nation's oldest organizations, and it's all about grassroots conservatives and protecting those liberties that we have throughout the United States. It was created more than 5 decades ago by the William F. Buckley ACUF. It works to advance the core values of liberty, personal responsibility, and fiscal responsibility, all of which are impacted by the criminal justice reform. Their mission is to educate Americans about conservative values and, kind of give us all a chance to understand the system better and how it impacts us and what we need to do to make sure that we are creating a better environment, not only for these prisoners, but again, as we're talking about what happens in those prison systems, affects us in the general population. One of our listeners had mentioned that maybe what we need to do is do better in finding out when we send these people to prison, what are we doing to make sure that they know who the ones are that are super dangerous, that can't be rehabilitated, and not spend money on people who cannot do the right thing. So I think that's what we're talking about. Brett Tolman is with us today. He is with the American Conservative Union Foundation. Good morning, Brett. Can you hear me?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. Good to have you with us this morning. I think it's interesting when we look at, particularly in the South, but I know the problem is all across the country. When you look at Mississippi and you've looked at Alabama as well. What are the similarities that you see, and are there the same problems, or is just the result the same?
Well, look, I've spent my career 25 years in the criminal justice system. I was a prosecutor for over a decade. I've put my fair share of bad guys away. The kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart, I put him away for the rest of his life, and proud of it. But I also became very much aware that we have over-incarceration issues based on bad or outdated policies and laws that need to be adjusted. And we are incarcerating individuals that we don't have to be spending $30,000 to $80,000 a year on when they have minor nonviolent offenses. Mississippi has the second highest incarceration rate. And right now, Alabama, who was struggling with the same thing, is facing a multi-billion-dollar investigation by the Department of Justice. So I'm hopeful that myself and other conservatives can come in to Mississippi and help and assist these legislators at making smart policies that preserve safety but deal with the over-incarceration problem.
Brett, I was talking a little bit earlier. I spent some time at the Tutwiler Prison for Women in Alabama. And, back in 2016, it was supposed to close because of investigations that came out and showed sexual abuse that was taking place there, the conditions that were there, the repressive environment. The governor ordered it closed after a federal investigation and an Equal Justice Initiative investigation. Yet that prison is still open. So the question is, with all these things that we talk about reform and trying to change legislation and policies, if a governor orders a prison closed and it's still open, does it really make a difference?
Well, see, the problem is if you don't adjust your laws so that you aren't incarcerating those that you can have confidence that they're not violent, but you're incarcerating everybody, and you're doing so with laws that are mandatory minimums that come in and punish for longer sentences than necessary. You haven't reduced the number of individuals that need to be incarcerated, and so closing a prison, it doesn't happen. But then look at Texas. You have Texas that has closed 8 prisons, saved billions of dollars. Why? How have they done that? They focused on smarter policies addressing recidivism and rehabilitation, just as you mentioned, so that they aren't incarcerating as many, and their crime rate has still fallen even further than many states that incarcerate at a higher rate.
When we look at some of the states like Alabama and Mississippi, are we doing a good enough job while these inmates are in prison to basically pick out those that we don't think can be rehabilitated? And while those are there, before policies are changed, can we do a better job with those that can go into the free world in a better position than they went in?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the key. We are not doing a good enough job. The statistics would be staggering to anybody that looks close enough at it, at the number who are struggling with mental health issues that we have long ago ignored or barely addressing. You also have drug addiction that in some facilities is over 80%. So you have a different person when they come in, than when they become sober, during the duration of their incarceration. And so we have not done a good enough job. Effort has to be made there. And conservatives, they should be the ones that lead this message, because we do care about the humanity and the individual, and we're taught those sort of principles that, all people matter. Now, that doesn't mean you don't punish somebody that does a horrific crime, but we shouldn't be kidding ourselves that if we focus just on punishment and we don't focus on rehabilitation, then we're just arresting and incarcerating the same individuals.
Well, let's face it, there are people out there that are apathetic to this issue. They don't care. They don't have anybody in prison. They think it doesn't impact them. But besides our ethical obligation as human beings that live on the same planet, I would imagine it's a tax issue. You talk about people that really shouldn't be incarcerated because it's so costly. I guess as taxpayers, those that don't care about the ethical aspect, they should consider it on a tax basis.
No, that's exactly right. I hear many conservatives who start to embrace criminal justice reform. They begin with an awareness that it's too expensive, and it's financially an impossible burden now for many states. But once they dig into it, they then understand and embrace also the rehabilitation and the reforming sort of the system and the individuals that are in the system, so that they have a fair chance to lead productive lives.
Brett, has the ACUF always had this as their primary target area to focus on, or have there been other issues that have been important to you besides criminal justice reform?
Well, it is an organization with a broad range of interests, but each individual, effort and issue that is focused on is really to try to keep Americans aware of core conservative values and the need for them, responsibility in the legislature. We can never depart from that, especially given what happens when Congress passes, for example, trillions of dollars, and we're passing that debt on to our children. So criminal justice reform is important, but being aware and monitoring and affecting government in a positive way across all spectrums is important to the ACU.
When we look at our prison system in the United States versus others, of course we know some are terrible, but are there others outside of our country that are really doing an exceptional job with this, or is this just a problem that's universal?
There are prison systems that are quite remarkable. Now, most of those have lower populations, and some of those have dedicated more thought, more education, more an intellectual and data-driven approach. So where they're doing it well in some of your Norwegian countries and otherwise, they're focused on rehabilitation. It can be very expensive. And so we have a challenge, certainly an enormous challenge with the population that we have and the incarceration rate that we have, because we have the highest in the world. And so it's a challenge, but it can be done. States, even conservative states have proven that good policies can result in remarkable, reduction in incarceration and an opportunity for people to thrive. And some of those adjustments are simple, like, not giving fines that are so onerous that they can't keep up with them, and so then they violate their parole or their probation, occupational licensing, those sort of things. Giving them the ability, once they do get out, to make sure that they can be successful, and then not incarcerating them too long. That's a combination that is working in multiple states right now.
We're talking with Brett Tolman with the American